May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, our God. Amen. Someone once told me that it would be a microscopic bug that would do us all in, and we all laughed. Well, the joke's now on us. It's still a bit surreal to realize that a flu virus is closing down the whole world. It's also difficult to accept that social isolation, one of our greatest fears, especially amongst the elders, is becoming the source of physical healing. The darkness of solitude is becoming the birthplace of hope. Quite the Lenten theme. Our lectionary reading for today includes the 23rd Psalm, and it helps us dig a bit deeper into this message of contradiction. Psalm 23 begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The Hebrew word for want is esar, the same word that is used in the Ten Commandments for covet. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or ass or toilet paper. We have traditionally understood "I shall not want" to mean that God will provide for all our needs. And indeed, this is a solid translation. But Hebrew readers will probably catch this double meaning of esar. I shall not want for anything, and I shall not covet. This verse could therefore mean God will provide for all my needs, especially if I don't covet what is not mine. Just as the COVID-19 virus spreads so quickly, so does the infection of fear and hoarding. I'm certainly not above anyone else in this. The only reason I don't have extra stacks of toilet paper in my house is that I was simply not fast enough. The clerks at the checkout said that people were wheeling 2 and 3 carts at a time, piled high with over $1,000. We don't have to dig very deeply to touch a base fear that we all have of scarcity. We fear that we do not have enough money, enough things, enough talent. As Brene Brown writes, underlying our fear of scarcity is a fear that we are not enough. But Psalm 23 assures us that we are enough, that we have enough. If we who have a wee bit more than we need give some of our abundance to those who have little, then we can say with certainty that God provides all that the world needs. I shalt not want, because I shalt not covet. Now let's jump down a few verses too. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the darkest valley, as our New Revised Standard Version reads, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This verse is the singular reason why Psalm 23 is read at funerals and at bedsides of those who are dying. It provides assurance of God's presence and protection, even in death. While true, this psalm, though, is actually not about death. It's about the promise of abundance and restoration while living in dark, scary times. The psalmist doesn't suggest that God will take us away from these challenges, rather that God will take us through them, through that darkest valley. Barbara Brown Taylor's book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, teaches us about the benefits of darkness. The body needs the dark to sleep deeply and allow its cells to be rejuvenated. But she notes that there are different types of darkness. The 16th century mystic St. John of the Cross, who wrote Dark Night of the Soul, describes 2 types of darkness. The first, oscura, means the dark of night, which brings a quiet healing. The second type, Tiniebla is the darkness of a soul caught in depression that can take people apart without putting them back together again. This second type of darkness is the one to which the psalmist refers. Sometimes we travel through a soul-wrenching, darkest valley through which we need God's wisdom, courage, and strength to pull us through. In this journey, we may find that the darkness does not change. Rather, we are the ones who change. It may involve a divestment of what we hold dear. Meister Eckhart wrote, "The soul does not grow by addition, but by subtraction." He continues, "Leave place, leave time, avoid even image, go forth without a way on the narrow path. Then you will find a desert track." Lent takes us on an inward path that can become narrow and rocky. We do not always have a choice about which path to follow, but we may have a choice about how to walk the path. Pema Chodron, a Buddhist teacher on Cape Breton Island, suggests that the problem is not out there. Instead, the problem is our resistance to what is there and a reluctance to learn to walk in the dark. In his book, And There Was Light, Jacques Lucerne describes his ability to see, even though he was blinded in an accident at the age of 8. He became permanently blind, completely blind in both eyes. But a few months later, he became aware of a colorful light that ebbed and flowed, whether his eyes were open or not. It was only those times that he became afraid. And when he was afraid, he found that the light began to disappear. When he was afraid that he would bump into something, he would. Anger and impatience had the same effect. He realized that when he felt jealous or unfriendly with his playmates, a bandage would come over his eyes. But when Jacques felt happy and serene, confident in his friendships, his other senses came alive, and he found that he could easily negotiate around obstacles. Little Jacques was learning how to tap into his God-given inner light to walk in the darkness. He grew up with the loving and wise guidance of parents who insisted that he not be segregated, but attend public school and do whatever he could with his classmates. Years passed, and as rumors of war began to circulate, he gathered 600 young men to form an underground resistance unit in France in the 1940s. He was highly valued because of his ability to see through his ears, smell, and second sense. He could correctly identify trees by hearing the different songs each type of tree sang. His hearing was so acute that it developed into a type of radar that steered him around obstacles. He learned German, English, Latin, and Greek. Eventually, Jacques and his comrades were betrayed, arrested, and sent to the Buchenwald concentration camp. Jacques was one of the few who survived, in part because he was able to tap into the inner light of God and use that light to be able to assist others. He could see when most of his prison mates were blinded by terror and despair. Each one of us has this inner light of God nestled deep within. Quakers call this the inward light that gives each person a direct awareness of God and God's will for that person. As Jacques discovered, our fears and anxiety, our sense of inadequacy and not being enough can shade our hearts from the light. When we learn how to reduce our fears and anxiety and tap into that inner light, we learn how to walk through the darkest valley. We are in a confusing time right now in which fear and anxiety abound. Out of social responsibility for communal physical health, Westworth has joined other churches and synagogues, mosques and temples in closing its building to the public. Our folks who live in nursing homes and retirement homes are now in forced isolation at a time when they need social support more than ever. These are dark, scary times for many. As we feel that fear and anxiety begin to rise, let us pause and breathe in the deep peace of the Spirit. Let us breathe out the tensions of our fears. Breathe in with me now, slowly, deeply. And as you breathe out, imagine that tension leaving your body. As you breathe in again, imagine the Spirit filling you with deep peace and the assurance of God's presence. As you continue this breath prayer, you may find that you have more than tension to breathe out. You may be able to breathe out God's healing to those around you, to those in the world who are losing family members and friends, to those who are being quarantined, to the doctors who are having to make difficult decisions in Italy and in other places about which life to save because there are not enough resources in that place to save everyone. Let us breathe in the healing peace of the Spirit and breathe out this prayer of healing for others. When we take this time to pray and center ourselves in the deep peace of God, we will find the inner light of God's presence begin to shine a little more brightly. This light will not only soothe our fears, but give us hope and energy to pass on to others. Now is the time when our Christian ministry matters more than ever. Call someone whom you know is isolated. Send a card to someone who has dementia so that they may read it over and over and know that they are not forgotten. Email and text those you know to check in with them, just to see how they're doing. If you're able to help run errands or deliver goods to those who are housebound, let us know as we coordinate care for others. If you could help us call our congregants just to check in with them, let us know as we put together a phone list. If you'd like to be part of a virtual confidential prayer circle, let us know and I will send you prayer requests. We won't be collecting food for West Broadway Community Ministry for the time being, but they do have a donation button on their website where you can specify donations for emergency food. Kitty O'Mara wrote the following: "And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows. And the people began to think differently. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger had passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed." I don't know what we will each discover as we walk our own valleys. I pray this time will give us a unique opportunity for healing. When we join each of our little lights of divine healing together, we can create a blaze of hope as we walk through that dark valley. God is with us, leading us beside waters that have become quite still these days, restoring our souls and enabling us to reach out virtual hands to one another and walk, perchance to dance, in the dark. Amen.